Thanks, Rafik. It's good to be here, and I know you've had a lot of speakers this afternoon. I'm going to be brief and just get to the point. A couple of points I want to make, but first of all, say thank you for being here and for your. I know you've heard from a lot of members of Congress. Let me say you've had an impressive number of between votes. We've got caught up in votes here, as you may or may not know, and but you've had an impressive number of members of Congress that have addressed you this afternoon, and that is unusual. To get that many speakers. So evidently this is something that is resonating with members of Congress. So you may think that sometimes your efforts go unnoticed, but I can tell you by the number of members that I've seen coming out and going back and forth here is very impressive. Certainly I think the issue that we're talking about this afternoon is something that can't be ignored. Defending Christians is so important, but also we are mindful that there are other religious minorities also that are at risk too, and we want to make sure that there's no religious minority that is persecuted in any way. But certainly the Christians we know that are targeted, and we want to make sure they are looked after as much as possible, and that we can do what we can. Everyone has been deeply affected nationwide by the stories that we've heard coming out of the region. Where Christians have been robbed, they've been beaten, they've been raped, they've been beheaded, and that's not to mention even the fact that a lot of the historical sites and the religious sites have been systematically destroyed over the last several months and the last few years. As a member of the House Appropriations Committee, as you know, the appropriations process is that process that continues to move every year, regardless of other bills. Some bills get tied up in committee, never get to move. We have to pass an appropriation bill. And so I had added an amendment, inserted it into the language of the House Foreign Operations language earlier in the summer. And this language really is something that really tries to address part of the issue. It's not solves all the issues, but certainly we're trying to make these little improvements everywhere we can. But it provides funding for the Department of State that would provide targeted humanitarian assistance for those in these vulnerable populations, such as the Christian community. There are several components to the language, but I want to in particular highlight a couple of them. First, the language aims to help accelerate the implementation of an immediate, coordinated, and sustained response to provide humanitarian assistance for these targeted populations like the Christians. And secondly, we've heard numerous reports that Christians are not being able to safely access the refugee camps in the region, and they're not even able to register for humanitarian aid with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. The reports are that actually the Christians in these communities are consistently targeted for violence. Some of them give up. They don't even try to find refuge in the camps. And Christians actually feel safer on their own, even in the ISIS environment, than they do inside the United Nations camps. And even Muslim women who are single cannot find safety in the camps. The problem is the system's broken, and we've got to help provide safe alternative access points for those desperately needing humanitarian services, especially for the Christian community. The language that we were able to put in the appropriation bill was included. The House Appropriations did pass it, and as we move on through this process, we hope to get that language also in the final version, and of course eventually signed into law. So those are some things that we're trying to do in addition to some of this other authorizing legislation that is also very important. But as I say in my earlier remarks, your presence here is so vital because you're getting the attention of members of Congress that, as you can imagine, during the course of the day, there's so many issues that are pulling at us that sometimes these issues can be forgotten. But and sometimes when they're out of sight, they are forgotten. But thanks for your help and making sure that this organization, Defense of Christians, is keeping this on the front burner for so many members of Congress. So for that, I want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time a couple days out of your schedule. I know several people in the audience out there that I know have labored a lot on this issue, and thank you for your work. So again, we will keep up the fight. Thank you for your presence, and we look forward to working with you. God bless you. God bless you.